Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. George Orwell said, "Early in life I had noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper." Well, nothing has changed, and it's not only true for newspapers, but it's also largely true for academia. Here's a story from 2015 from the University of California at Irvine. Massive Northeast Greenland glacier is rapidly melting, UCI-led team finds. Breakup of the glacier could substantially raise global sea levels. A glacier in northeast Greenland that holds enough water to raise global sea levels by more than 18 inches has come unmoored from a stabilizing sill and is crumbling into the North Atlantic Ocean. Losing mass at a rate of 5 billion tons per year, the glacier entered a phase of accelerated retreat in 2012, according to findings published in the current issue of Science. North Greenland glaciers are changing rapidly. Wow, this article has a lot of scary stuff in it. A massive glacier is falling apart and is going to raise sea level by 18 inches. And this 2015 article says that the glacier started an accelerated retreat in 2012. Now let's look for ourselves and see if what the article is saying is accurate. This was the edge of the glacier on August 20th, 2012. The article was published in 2015, so let's look now at August 20th, 2015. Well, the edge of the glacier is almost exactly the same as it was in 2012. In fact, in some locations, the glacier expanded between 2012 and 2015. Now let's look at 2019. The edge of the glacier in 2019 is almost exactly the same as it was in 2015 and in 2012. There's little or no truth to what the University of California is reporting, but saying scary stuff brings in more research money. And they're of course assuming that nobody is going to check to see if they're telling the truth. Their claim is that glaciers in North and Northeast Greenland are changing rapidly. And if we go back to 1939, the world's leading Arctic expert, Dr. Hans Ullmann, said that all the glaciers in eastern Greenland were rapidly melting. He said, "Everything points to the fact that the climate in that region has been growing warmer during recent years. It may without exaggeration be said that the glaciers of Greenland, like those in Norway, face the possibility of a catastrophic collapse." In the 2015 article they used the word crumble instead of collapse, but they're recycling the same propaganda from 1939. And here's an article from 1903. Glaciers disappear. The ice in Greenland is melting more rapidly than it's formed. Comparison of the descriptions of the Jakobshavn Glacier shows that its edge has receded 8 miles since 1850 and that it's lost 20 to 30 feet in depth. And here's a map showing the rapid retreat of the Jakobshavn Glacier starting in 1851. As the previous article mentioned, there was 8 miles of retreat between 1851 and 1902. So the Jakobshavn Glacier was rapidly retreating in 1851. But now, according to National Geographic, that same glacier is growing. National Geographic says, "A Greenland glacier is growing. That's not good news." This is another essential part of propaganda. If the glacier was shrinking, that would be bad news. If the glacier is growing, that's also bad news. No matter what the real-world observations are, the press will find a way to spin it into global warming bad news. The Jakobshavn Glacier in West Greenland is growing, and so is the largest glacier in North Greenland. The Petermann Glacier in North Greenland has grown several miles since 2012. But 120 years ago, Greenland glaciers and other glaciers were melting all over the world. July 27, 1903, melting glaciers. Observations of the alpine glaciers during a series of years have supplied proof that these great ice streams have long been in process of recession. Dr. M.C. Engel of Copenhagen, who visited the Jakobshavn Glacier last summer, has made a collection of facts which seems to show conclusively that the glaciers of Greenland are also receding. Here's one from 1923. North Pole melting, many glaciers vanished. Is the North Pole going to melt entirely? Science is asking these questions. Reports from fishermen, seal hunters, and explorers who sail the seas around Spitsbergen in the eastern Arctic all point to a radical change in climatic conditions, with hitherto unheard of high temperatures on that part of the Earth's surface. Also in 1923, glaciers in Glacier National Park were melting so quickly that experts predicted they would be gone in 25 years, or by 1948. The glaciers in Glacier National Park didn't melt in 1948, so experts changed their predictions to 1961 instead. Well, that didn't happen either, so experts changed their predictions to Glacier National Park ice-free by the year 2002. Well, that didn't happen either, so National Geographic changed the prediction to Glacier National Park ice-free by the year 2020. Well, that didn't happen either, so the New York Times changed the prediction to Glacier National Park ice-free by the year 2044. So the current predictions for an ice-free Glacier National Park are now almost a century later than the original predictions. But these climate fraudsters have a bigger problem now because some glaciers are actually growing, like the Jakobshavn and Petermann glaciers in Greenland. Now let's compare what we've been looking at to NASA's temperature graph. We've seen that glaciers were rapidly melting from 1850 to at least 1939, which NASA says were the coldest years on record. And now NASA says Earth is record hot, but the largest glaciers in Greenland are growing. So according to the climate geniuses at NASA, ice melts when it's very cold, and ice grows when it's extremely hot. As I've been pointing out for the past 13 years, this graph has no credibility. Ice doesn't lie, but climate scientists do. Now let's go back in time to 4,000 years ago. The largest ice cap in northern Greenland is only 3,500 to 4,000 years old. This is because prior to 4,000 years ago, the Arctic was much warmer. Here's a map of that ice cap which formed 4,000 years ago. It's very close to the glacier which we were looking at the beginning of this video. According to the 1990 United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, 5,000 years ago was the warmest time of the last 10,000 years. And 800 years ago was the warmest time of the last 1,000 years. The existence of the Holocene maximum 5,000 years ago and the medieval warm period 800 years ago pretty much destroys the theory that carbon dioxide controls the Earth's climate. Because Earth was much warmer, yet carbon dioxide levels were much lower. Here's a more detailed look at the decline in global temperatures over the last 8,000 years. We have incontrovertible evidence that the Arctic was much warmer 5,000 years ago. 5,000-year-old fossilized tree stumps have been found right up to the edge of the Arctic Ocean in Canada. This land is now all permafrost, and the closest trees grow 80 to 100 kilometers further south. Temperatures had to have been much warmer 5,000 years ago. The Holocene maximum is very inconvenient for climate scientists pushing the global warming agenda, so now they're trying to erase it. Here's a recent story. Scientists solve a major climate mystery, confirming Earth is hotter than it's been in at least 120 centuries. Once again, trees and ice don't lie, but climate scientists do. CNN reports, Greenland's ice sheet is melting as fast as at any time in the last 12,000 years. Study shows. Wow, that's scary. Now let's look at the actual data from the Danish Meteorological Institute. They update this graph of the surface mass balance of Greenland every single day. The surface mass balance is the difference between the amount of new snow falling on Greenland and the amount which melts. On average, nearly 400 billion more tons of snow falls on Greenland every year than melts. During 2017 and 2018, there was a large excess in the amount of ice building up on Greenland's surface. 2019 was low, but 2020 and 2021 so far have been just about average. Over the past 5 years, about 2 trillion tons of excess ice has built up on Greenland's surface. This excess weight on the surface of Greenland is what drives the glaciers down towards the sea, where they calve off and break off icebergs into the ocean. The reason why Greenland calves off so many icebergs is because there's a huge excess of snow in the interior. If we didn't have this process of glaciers flowing to the sea and relieving the excess ice from the interior, the Greenland ice sheet would extend up to the top of the troposphere. In order to maintain balance, almost all of this excess snow has to flow down to the sea in glaciers, break off, and form icebergs. And then what climate alarmists do is they go down to the terminus of glaciers and take pictures of the glaciers calving, and then claim that it's a sign of climate change. So essentially, climate alarmists are misinforming the public about what's going on at both ends of the glacier. The surface of Greenland is not melting, and glaciers calving is not an indication of climate change. The people on the Titanic could confirm that glaciers calving into the sea and forming icebergs is not something new. The press is misinforming the public, and there's nothing new about this. Here's the same story from 1934 showing Manhattan underwater. And this is a modern version of the same fake news from 1934. This misinformation and propaganda from the press is not innocent. They're using it as an excuse to do some catastrophically stupid things. Bill Gates wants to pollute the Earth's atmosphere in order to block the sun, and he's basing this on NASA's fake temperature graphs. They want to make the Earth even colder, and at the same time they want to take away our reliable supplies of fossil fuels and replace them with unreliable wind and solar. The Biden administration and other crazies like Bill Gates are driving us towards a major human disaster. Wind and solar are not adequate, they're not reliable, and they fail at the worst possible times. The United States is not overheating. In fact, the frequency of hot days in the United States has plummeted over the last 90 years. When I presented similar information to the Washington State Senate 4 years ago, this is how the Seattle Press reported on my testimony. Not a word on any of the evidence I presented, they just said, "Climate change denier testifies for 40 minutes. I've been trying to warn people for more than 10 years that we're headed towards disaster. But the danger isn't from the climate, the danger is due to bad policy driven by climate alarmism." The press has always been awful since Orwell's time, but it's gotten much worse now. They have no interest in facts and are happily pushing dangerous propaganda. One exception is Sky News in Australia. Andrew Bolt said recently, "You can be completely wrong about climate as long as you exaggerate the scare and spread more panic." There's no reason to be panicked about climate, but the press is almost 100% unified in spreading this mindless propaganda. Toto has been reporting on this for the past 13 years. You can visit him and Kyrie on the web at realclimatescience.com.